The night my mother-in-law told me I'd never be good enough for her son, I smiled, nodded, and started planning my exit. She just didn't know it yet. My name is Claire, and I was 31 years old when I finally stopped trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided I didn't belong. I married Daniel when I was 26. He was the kind of man who held doors open and remembered how I took my coffee, and for the first 2 years, I genuinely believed I'd married into something good. His family had money, not obscene money, but the comfortable, old money kind that came from his grandfather's construction business in Charleston. The kind that bought a lake house in the Low Country and put everyone's kids through private school without anyone batting an eye. I came from a different world. My mother worked nights as a hospital admin in Ohio, and I'd put myself through nursing school on loans and a part-time job folding sweaters at a mall kiosk. Daniel used to say that's what he loved about me, that I'd built something out of nothing. His mother, Patricia, saw it differently. To her, I was a girl who'd married up, and she never let me forget it. It started small, the way these things always do. A comment about my budget taste when I picked out curtains for our first apartment. A joke at Thanksgiving about how I probably didn't know what a salad fork was for, growing up the way I did. I laughed along because that's what you do when you're 26, and desperate to be liked by the people who raised the man you love. I told myself it was just Southern teasing, that I needed thicker skin, that Patricia loved Daniel so fiercely she was just being protective. I made excuses for 5 years. I have a whole catalog of excuses I made for that family, and looking back, I'm almost embarrassed by how generous I was with my own dignity. We had a daughter, Maya, when I was 29. I thought a grandchild might soften things. It didn't. If anything, it gave Patricia a new battlefield. She had opinions about everything. The formula I used, whether I should be breastfeeding longer, whether Maya should be in a Montessori program or the same Episcopal preschool Daniel had attended. When I gently pushed back, even once, even kindly, I became difficult. Daniel's sister, Brooke, had a way of saying things with a smile that left bruises you couldn't point to. Claire's just sensitive, she'd say to the room. Like I wasn't sitting right there. She didn't grow up around this kind of family, so she doesn't always know how we do things. I want to be fair to Daniel, because for a long time, I was fair to him in my head, even when I wasn't being fair to myself. He wasn't cruel. He worked in commercial real estate, came home tired, loved Maya with his whole chest, and in private, alone with me, he'd sometimes agree that his mother went too far. But the second we were in a room with his family, something in him shut off. He became a different version of himself, quieter, smaller, allergic to conflict. He'd let his mother say things about me that he'd never have tolerated from a stranger. And when I asked him to say something, he'd tell me, "That's just how she is, Claire. You know that by now." As if 5 years of knowing it was supposed to make it hurt less. The night everything broke was a Sunday dinner at his parents' house in Mount Pleasant. The kind they hosted every few weeks, dining room table set with the good china. His father pouring wine like he was performing for an audience. Maya, who'd just turned 2, was sitting in her booster seat next to me, and I'd brought a container of cut-up mango and strawberries because she'd had a stomachache that week, and I didn't want her eating the heavy dessert his mother always served. Patricia noticed immediately. "Is she not allowed cake now?" she asked, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Her eyebrows arched in that way she had, like she was already winning an argument I hadn't agreed to have. "She's had an upset stomach," I said. "I just want to keep things light tonight." Patricia made a small, disbelieving sound in her throat. "You know, when Daniel was little, I never restricted anything. Children need to learn moderation, not deprivation. But I suppose everyone parents differently these days." The way she said, "these days" made it sound like a diagnosis. I let it go. I'd learned by then that letting things go was the price of admission to family dinners. But Brooke wasn't finished. "Honestly, Claire, you read one parenting blog and suddenly you're an expert," she said. And a couple of cousins down the table actually laughed. The kind of easy, complicit laugh that told me everyone already knew the joke was on me before she'd even finished the sentence. Something in my chest went very still and very hot at the same time. Maybe it was that Maya was sitting right there, watching her mother get mocked at a table she didn't yet understand. Maybe it was that this had happened 100 times before, and I'd swallowed it 100 times before, and my body simply ran out of room to swallow anything else. "I'm not reading blogs," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm listening to her pediatrician, and I'd appreciate it if we didn't talk about my parenting like I'm not in the room." The table went quiet in that particular way. Southern rooms go quiet. Not silent, exactly, but thick, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would apologize first. Patricia's mouth tightened. "There's no need to get an attitude about it." "I don't have an attitude. I have a daughter with a sensitive stomach and I'm trying to take care of her." "You always do this," Brooke said, shaking her head like she was disappointed in a child. "Every single time you turn a simple comment into some big confrontation. It's exhausting, honestly." I looked at Daniel. I want to tell you, I expected him to defend me, but the truth is, after 5 years, I think some small, tired part of me already knew he wouldn't. He sat there with his wine glass in his hand, his jaw tight, looking anywhere but at me. Not at his mother, not at his sister, not at me. Just at the tablecloth, like if he stared hard enough at the embroidered pattern, the whole moment might politely excuse itself. "Daniel," I said quietly. "Can you say something?" He set his glass down. "Claire, can we not do this here, in front of everyone?" That was it. That was the whole sentence. Not "Mom, that's enough." Not "Brooke, don't talk to my wife like that." Just a request that I make myself smaller, make myself quieter, so the dinner could continue undisturbed. I stood up, not dramatically. I didn't throw my napkin or raise my voice. I picked Maya up out of her booster seat, gathered the container of fruit, and said, "I think we're going to head home." Patricia said something behind me. I don't even remember what. Some comment about how I was making a scene by leaving, which struck me, even in the moment, as one of the more absurd things I'd ever heard. Daniel followed me out to the car, apologizing in that soft, useless way he always did. Not for what had happened, but for the fact that I was upset about it. "You can't keep doing this," he said in the driveway. "Every time my family says something you don't like, you act like it's a federal offense. They love you, Claire. This is just how they show it." I buckled Maya into her car seat and looked at him over the roof of the car. "If this is how your family shows love," I said, "I don't want it anymore." He didn't understand what I meant that night. I'm not sure I fully understood it myself yet. Not the shape of it, not what I was actually going to do. But something had shifted permanently, the way a bone sets crooked if you don't treat the break in time. I drove home in silence, Maya asleep in the back seat, and somewhere on the highway between Mount Pleasant and our place in West Ashley, I started making a list in my head. Not a list of grievances. I had plenty of those already, memorized like scripture. A list of steps. Here is the thing nobody tells you about finally deciding to leave a marriage. Or at least leave the version of a marriage that requires you to disappear. A little more of yourself every year. It doesn't happen in one dramatic night. The dinner was the moment I stopped lying to myself. But the actual leaving took 3 careful months, because I had a daughter and I am a nurse, and both of those facts meant I was not about to do anything reckless with either of our futures. The first thing I did, the very next morning, was call a family law attorney. Her name was Miss Alvarez, and I found her through a friend from nursing school who'd gone through her own divorce 2 years earlier. I sat in her office on a Tuesday during my lunch break, still in scrubs, and laid out everything: the marriage, the in-laws, the dinner. The years of feeling erased in rooms full of people who were supposed to love me. She didn't flinch at any of it. She'd heard versions of this story more times than I could count. "Here's what I need you to understand," she told me. "South Carolina is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. So what you're entitled to and what you walk away with depends a lot on documentation. If you want to leave, we do this the right way. We don't do anything that could later be used against you in a custody dispute. No removing Maya from the state without a custody agreement in place. No moving money around in ways that look suspicious. We build a record. I appreciated her bluntness more than I can say. I'd spent 5 years being told gently, and not so gently, that I was the unreasonable one, and here was a woman in a navy blazer telling me exactly what reasonable, lawful protected steps looked like. We talked through everything: temporary custody arrangements, child support guidelines, the fact that South Carolina courts generally favor maintaining a child's existing relationships with both parents, which meant I needed to be realistic about what I could ask for and what I couldn't. I didn't tell Daniel any of this yet. I know how that sounds, but I want to be honest about the order of things, because the order matters. I wasn't hiding a plan to disappear with our daughter in the night. I was building a foundation so that when I did tell him, I wouldn't be negotiating from a position where his family's lawyers. And believe me, Patricia and her husband had lawyers on retainer. The way other people have a regular dentist could paint me as impulsive or unstable. I'd watched too many women in my own life get torn apart in custody battles because they left in anger instead of leaving with documentation. The second thing I did was talk to my manager at the hospital about a transfer. I'd been a labor and delivery nurse at MUSC for almost 6 years, and it turned out the hospital system had an opening at their satellite facility up in Asheville, North Carolina. Close enough that it wasn't some impossible relocation a judge would balk at. Far enough that it put real distance between me and Sunday dinners in Mount Pleasant. Asheville also happened to be a 40-minute drive from where my own mother had retired. 3 years earlier, after my father passed. I hadn't lived near her since I left for nursing school, and the thought of being close to her again, of Maya growing up with a grandmother who adored her without conditions, did something to my chest I can only describe as relief. The third thing, and the hardest, was simply continuing to live my normal life while all of this moved underneath the surface. I went to work. I picked Maya up from daycare. I made dinner. I went to one more excruciating Sunday dinner at the Whitlock house, sat through Patricia's comments about how I seemed distracted lately, and said nothing except that I'd been busy at work. Daniel sent a few text messages in the days after the blow-up. Nothing demanding, just careful testing messages. Can we talk tonight after Maya's asleep? I told him yes, and we did talk several times, and in those conversations I started saying the quiet part out loud, slowly. The way you'd diffuse something rather than detonate it. I can't keep doing dinners where your family talks about me like I'm not there. I told him. One night in October, the two of us at the kitchen table with the lights low so we wouldn't wake Maya. And I can't keep being married to someone who watches it happen and says nothing. They're my family, Claire. I can't just cut them off. I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to choose me, just once, in the room, instead of after in the car, when it doesn't cost you anything. He didn't have an answer for that. I think somewhere in him, he knew I was right. The way you know a tooth is going to need to come out before you actually let the dentist near it. But knowing and doing are different muscles, and Daniel had spent 33 years never having to develop the second one. By December, I'd consulted with Ms. Alvarez 4 more times. We'd drafted a proposed parenting plan, joint legal custody, with Maya living primarily with me, and a generous, structured visitation schedule for Daniel, including extended time in the summers and alternating holidays, all of it built around what family courts in the Carolinas typically approve, not around what I wanted in some fantasy version of fairness. I wasn't trying to take Maya away from her father. I want to be very clear about that, because so much of what I'd absorbed from years of Lifetime movie logic told a different story. The vengeful wife who disappears with the kids and the wounded husband left behind. That's not what this was. I loved that Daniel loved our daughter. I just couldn't keep being married to the family that came attached to him. I told him everything on a Thursday night in January, almost 4 months after that Sunday dinner. I'd accepted the position in Asheville. I had an apartment lined up 15 minutes from my mother's house. I had a parenting plan drafted by an attorney, ready for his attorney to review, built around shared custody and a transition period so Maya's routine wouldn't be upended all at once. I wasn't asking his permission. I was telling him what I'd decided and inviting him to be part of building it with me instead of around me. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he asked the question I'd been bracing for. "You're taking Maya to North Carolina." "I'm taking Maya to North Carolina. With a custody agreement, with your attorney's input, with a visitation schedule that gives you real time with her. I'm not taking her from you. I'm taking myself away from your family, and she happens to be coming with me, because I'm her mother and that's not up for negotiation. And if I fight it? Then we go through the court process, the way every divorced family in this country does, and a judge decides what's fair. Because that's how this works. I'm not running. I called a lawyer in September, Daniel. I've been doing this the legal way the entire time." I think that surprised him more than anything. Not that I was leaving, but that I'd been so careful, so deliberate, so unwilling to give him or his family any ammunition. There was no scene, no letter on the counter discovered after I'd already boarded a plane, no frantic phone calls from an airport. Just a conversation, on a Thursday, in a kitchen, between two adults who'd built a life together and were now, with as much dignity as either of us could manage, taking it apart. The months that followed were not easy, and I won't pretend the story of my life folded itself into something tidy. There were mediation sessions where Daniel's attorney pushed back on the relocation, arguing it would harm his relationship with Maya. There was a court hearing in March where a family court judge in Charleston County reviewed our proposed parenting plan, asked both of us pointed questions, and ultimately approved a modified version. Primary custody to me, relocation permitted, with Daniel receiving every other long weekend, half the summer, and alternating major holidays, plus the standing right to video call Maya every evening. It wasn't a fantasy outcome. It was a real one, built on real law, the kind that exists precisely because so many families need it. Patricia did not take it well, predictably. There was a period of about 6 weeks where she called Daniel constantly, convinced I'd kidnapped her granddaughter, an accusation that fell apart instantly. The moment anyone looked at the actual custody order with my name and Daniel's name and a judge's signature on it, Brooke sent me one long, furious text message accusing me of destroying the family, which I read once and did not respond to because I'd finally learned, after 5 years, that silence cost me nothing and explanations cost me everything. We moved to Asheville in April. Maya was 2.5, and within a few weeks, she had a favorite swing at the park 3 blocks from my mother's house, and a grandmother who picked her up from daycare on the days I worked late shifts at the hospital, and a bedroom painted the soft yellow she'd pointed at in a paint store and refused to be talked out of. I won't tell you. It was an instant transformation, some movie montage of healing. There were nights I cried in my new apartment from sheer exhaustion, doing the math on a single income, missing the parts of my marriage that had once been good before they got buried under everything else. But there were also mornings I woke up and realized I hadn't braced myself for anyone's judgment before I'd even had coffee, and that absence of bracing felt, for the first time in years, like breathing. Daniel and I settled into something neither of us expected. He drove up to Asheville every other weekend, stayed at a hotel near my mother's neighborhood, and took Maya for hikes in the Blue Ridge Mountains, building a relationship with her that, oddly, felt more present than the version of fatherhood he'd practiced while we were still married and constantly performing for his family. Away from Mount Pleasant, away from Sunday dinners, and Patricia's running commentary. He started saying things to me he'd never said before. That he knew he should have spoken up at that dinner. That he'd spent his whole life so afraid of his mother's disappointment that he'd let it cost him things that actually mattered. That he was in therapy now, something I never thought I'd hear him say. We didn't get back together, if that's the ending you're hoping for. I want to be honest about that too, Because I think too many of these stories end with a bow tied around a reconciliation that wouldn't actually hold up under its own weight. What we built instead was something steadier. A real co-parenting partnership. Two people who respected each other across a court-approved custody schedule. Who could sit at the same table at Maya's kindergarten graduation, 2 years later, without anyone's stomach in knots. Patricia eventually softened, in her own limited way, sending birthday cards and the occasional stiff, careful visit, though I never let her back into a position to comment on how I raised my daughter. Some doors, once you understand what walked through them, you keep locked for good, even after the weather changes. I think about that Sunday dinner sometimes, the mango and strawberries in their plastic container, Brooke's laugh rippling down the table, Daniel staring at the tablecloth instead of at me. I used to think the moment that changed my life was dramatic. A slammed door, a plane ticket, a single unforgettable line. But it wasn't dramatic at all. It was small and quiet and almost boring. A woman standing up from a dinner table, picking up her daughter, and deciding that respect was not something she was willing to keep auditioning for. Everything after that was just paperwork and patience, as in the slow, unglamorous work of building a life where I no longer had to make myself smaller to be loved. That's the part nobody puts on a thumbnail, but it's the only part that actually mattered.